Are you unknowingly carrying shame that's sabotaging your relationships and self worth? Dr. Zoe today unpacks how complex shame hides in plain sight and what you can do to finally break free from its grip.
Have you ever felt something was wrong but couldn't explain it? Like the person you love was slowly chipping away at your sense of self?
Believe me, we have been there. Different marriages, but to the same man, with the same toxic pattern. But God was still working.
We're Lizzie and Dina, women of faith, survivors, and truth tellers.
Surviving toxic relationships is for any woman stuck in confusion, healing after betrayal, or just searching for her voice again.
You are not crazy.
You are deeply loved.
Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. Zoe to the podcast. She has dedicated her career to helping individuals untangle the complexities of shame and understand its profound impact on our relationships with others and with ourselves. In her upcoming book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, Dr. Zoe offers a transformative approach to healing complex shame with a powerful message of hope, freedom, and authenticity. She brings deep insight into topics like how shame keeps women stuck in difficult situations, how intentional sisterhood and healthy boundaries can be tools for healing, and how we can begin to restore a relationship with ourselves. We are so excited to talk with her today about healing growth and what it means to truly live free. Welcome, Dr. Zoe, to Surviving Toxic Relationships. We are so glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here and excited for the conversation.
We are too. So please share with everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, who am I? So I'm Dr. Zoe. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm a writer, speaker, podcast host, and I'm a mama of 5 humans, which is sometimes a little bit crazy. I also have 2 Labradoodles and I live in Southern California. I'm a bit of a risk taker, but really my life's purpose is helping women overcome complex shame and codependency so they can experience healthy love and freedom.
So tell us how you got started on this journey. Lizzie and I were especially struck that you chose shame. So why did you pull that out as a really strong topic for what you discuss?
Yeah, because I walked it myself. And so oh my goodness, I'm trying to figure out, where do I start? I grew up as a Black girl in this white community in this little tiny town in Maryland. And that's where my shame story started, just in racial identity and always feeling different and getting the message externally that, my skin color was wrong. But I just continued to just snowball and create more shame in my life. I got pregnant when I was 15. I also grew up in a very fundamental Christian home. My dad was a prominent doctor in the community, and my parents were basically like, yeah, this isn't happening here. So they shipped me off to a crisis pregnancy center. Well, no, it's really just a pregnancy home, where it was understood I would come back without a child. And so I left my baby in a hospital in Virginia and went back home to pretend like nothing had happened, which I did very well. I learned to cover up all of my shame with accomplishments. And I, excelled academically. I excelled athletically, got a scholarship to UCLA. I quickly got married. I met my husband at 18 and quickly got married at 19 and really just entered into a codependency relationship. And over the course of my life, I got my degree, I got my master's degree, my doctorate in clinical psychology, and I went through a number of experiences that caused my shame to kind of put itself right in front of my face. And it kind of culminated after having my first kept daughter. I had 2 boys before then. And she was born with a very rare genetic disorder, which really caused me to believe in my mistaken theology that God was punishing me for having placed my first child with adoption. And that kind of started my shame spiral. But it wasn't until after I reunited with my birth daughter and my father's funeral that I shared the story with my family, including my children who didn't know. And that really started my journey of learning to untangle my shame. And there was a book that I read. It's called You Are Your Best Thing by Tarana Burke. This book was really the impetus for me to begin to name complex shame, because in her book, she began to talk about shame and how her experience and the experience of people she had interviewed was that they weren't able to alleviate shame by doing what Brene Brown says, which is talking about and experiencing external compassion, that it didn't work. And she was trying to understand why that was. And she actually had Brene Brown write the foreword to her book. And Brene said, my research is solid. Like, I know what I'm talking about. My research is solid and that works. She said, but lived experience trumps research. And so she gave that validity to Tarana's experience. And so I began to think, what is it about this type of shame? Because I have the same shame. What is it about this type of shame that is not easily cured by being vulnerable and experiencing external compassion? Because I told my family I got external compassion, but there was this deep part of me that was just like, you don't understand. And so that led me to really researching shame and understanding, both for myself and for my clients, what this type of shame is, how it's created, how it's different, and how it's untangled. And what I noticed about myself and my clients was that most people who have complex shame tend to be in codependent relationships.
That makes all kinds of sense.
Wow. Yeah, that was really good.
So, can you give us the definition, Dr. Zoe, of complex shame?
So, complex shame is a type of shame that is attached to your identity. It does tell you, I am wrong, but it also creates this codependency that I talked about. And there's different types of shame. So, if we look at simple shame, you feel that sense of, I'm wrong, I need to hide, but you're able to express it eventually when you're taught, and it alleviates itself. The difference in complex shame is that it does not get alleviated by external compassion and vulnerability. It also tends to attach itself to people who have what I call internalizer personality. They tend to internalize everything. And the other thing about complex shame, and why I call it complex, is that most people experience a shame and it's more singular. But with complex shame, you tend to experience a shame and then you're sabotaging yourself and hurting yourself while you're running from the shame. And so all of your blame gets attached to something that might not even be your fault. And so it becomes complex. People in marginalized communities tend to have a higher rate of complex shame, but many people have it, and they think maybe they have toxic shame, or they think it's just simple shame. And so I'm really wanting to put voice to, it might be complex shame.
Do you think they know that they have this complex shame, or do you think so many people are used to just surviving, with all of this, that they don't even realize it? What do you find it with your clients?
I didn't know. It wasn't something that I could identify and name until I began to see it and hear other people name it. So most people are unaware of their shame. And the reason why is because we are shamed so early in our lives. Babies as young as 18 months begin to feel shame. Our parents are really good at shaming children, myself included. I mean, we all are, without understanding something different. And so because most people experience shame their whole life, they're not recognizing where they're hiding and when they feel it. And most people also don't recognize the difference between shame and guilt. And so when they go into these relationships and they're having these codependent experiences, they might just be thinking, I'm just empathic. Oh, I just really care about this person, or I just feel bad about myself, or I feel bad about them. They're not recognizing that shame is what's keeping them in this unhealthy dynamic.
That's amazing. So what kind of guidance do you give people? But also, what are some signs that our audience could maybe understand? Like, how would they know that what they're feeling and what they're dealing with and their actions in their life that they're not proud of could be motivated by this complex shame?
Well, the very first thing I ask people to do is pay attention to wherever you hide. Wherever in the world you hide, in relationships, at work, that's exactly where shame is, because shame, the function of shame, is to make us hide. And the reason why is because Guilt tells us something, like we've done something wrong. And so when we've done something wrong, there's an option. We can repair, we can apologize, we can choose to do something different. But shame says, I am wrong. And if that's the case, if I am wrong, then there's nothing I can do about it but hide so people can't see it, right? And so anywhere in the world that you are hiding, and we hide a lot in relationships, anytime you think, oh, I don't want them to know, I don't want them to see, that's where shame hides.
Okay, so by hide, you mean maybe withholding. Would that make sense? Like withholding parts of themselves or just not speaking up, not being authentic? Was that what
That's
that would mean?
exactly what I mean. Whenever you have that sense of, I don't want to tell the whole truth, I don't want them to see, I don't want them to know. And we express that in various ways in our life. And like you said, it could be avoiding the truth, it could be withholding, not telling it could be just distancing in our relationship because the intimacy feels too vulnerable. We don't really want to be seen, because we're fearful that if we're seen, then they will see the thing that we're ashamed of. So it shows up, hiding shows up in lots of different ways, but you tend to notice when you feel that way, when you don't feel comfortable showing someone something about yourself.
That's fantastic. So, as a clinician, what do you do to help your clients to not only recognize that they're in shame, but eventually how do you get them to help themselves? Like, since
Yeah.
obviously what you're saying, what Brene Brown said works, you said it doesn't for everybody because there's a much deeper,
Right.
many layers in this, sounds like, in this type of shame.
Yeah.
So how do you, to recognize, and how do you help?
Well, one of the things I just want to point out is that because people with complex shame tend to be internalizers, they tend to connect with externalizers. So people who also have a lot of shame, because people who are narcissists, people who have personality disorders are carrying a deep toxic shame, different than complex shame. And because they cannot hold the shame and they definitely don't internalize, they project their shame onto everybody else. And so what they do is they make the internalizer, the complex shame person, feel terrible, right? They project it. And so you're going to be in this experience often of this relationship where this person is making you feel so bad, probably gaslighting you about it as well. And you're taking it all on because you believe you're to blame. And you believe if I could work harder, if I could try harder, if I could say the right things, be the person, if I hide my shame, then they're going to accept me and love me the way that maybe they did in the beginning during, the honeymoon period. And so that's a pattern I just want people to recognize is happening when you have shame. And here's the deal, even with people who are in healthier relationships, right? There still tends to be the codependency, because what happens is if you are hiding and the person you're in a relationship with loves you, you don't feel loved because there's a part of you that knows, but they don't see the real me, so they can't love me, right? And a lot of this isn't really conscious, but you don't feel loved even when someone is loving you well, and then you tend to respond to them as if they don't love you, and it just creates this unhealthy cycle. So the question you ask is, what do you do, right? The first thing we need to do is understand that we have these, what I call, it's the phantom critic. We have these messages. They're toxic messages that created the shame, and we need to go back and figure out, where did they come from? Because what happens is could be our childhood, it could be a last relationship, but when we're in these toxic relationships, when we get away from them, we imagine that we're done with that. We are done. We're moving on. We're going to be healthy. But what we don't realize is that we just pack up all of those words that those people told us and we co-sign with them. We bring them with us and we repeat them back to ourselves, maybe in our voice, so we don't recognize it as theirs. It becomes our own. And so I help my clients start to recognize, what are those voices and where did they originally come from? And then what we need to do is begin to untangle the shame. And we do that by talking about blame. So when it comes to shame, like I said, especially complex shame, there's an incident or multiple incidents. We feel a sense of shame. And like I told you, we then run from it and we sabotage. So in the sabotaging, we're hurting ourselves, and people do it in various ways. And then we become responsible for the shame, and that's why it becomes complex. Another way is that even if we are completely victimized, what happens in the process of victimization is we still make micro choices. We decide to run, or we decide to not run. We decide to do, little choices in the process of the victimization. And it's very easy for our brain to kind of twist it upon ourselves. And what happens in normal therapy, I should say, traditional therapy, is therapists want to be quick to take your blame away, to say it wasn't your fault, you couldn't help it, right? But then there's that little piece that says, oh, but you don't know, I could have run. There was that split second I could have run. I could have chosen not to go in that door, whatever it is. And so I work with my clients to, instead of taking that blame away, acknowledging the blame. Let's go ahead, and it's not victim blaming. It's helping your brain do what your brain needs to do, which is look at it. You're already blaming yourself. Let's go ahead and talk about all the things you could have done, and let's forgive yourself. Let's forgive yourself for those choices. And when someone is able to do that, and when I talk about forgiveness, I love the quote, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. It's not attached to anybody. It's not even necessarily attached to yourself. You're just giving up all hope that you could have done something different, that anybody could have done something different. And when you're able to forgive yourself specifically for those things, now you start to release the shame. Now you can start the process of being vulnerable. And you also are beginning to recognize that even if you're vulnerable and you don't get that external validation, you don't need it because you've already given it to yourself, right? And so now in that process, you can start to release the shame. There needs to be some maintenance, and there's always maintenance because I still experience shame on a daily basis. And so in my book, I also talk about maintenance.
That was well said. That was so beautifully put. And I know, like you were saying earlier, that guilt and shame could be kind of equal. So do you find that if a person is dealing with both the guilt and the shame, that by dealing with the shame, they're also dealing with the guilt? Because it sounds like some of those techniques just kind of help both.
Yeah, they do. They would definitely help both. And guilt and shame, they do go together. Guilt is just a little easier of a emotion to work with than shame. But yes, if you're attacking the shame, you're going to be attacking the guilt as well.
My goodness, that piece about letting the victim actually take some ownership, man, that really struck home. Like that makes 100% sense because, I have someone very close to me that were molested in childhood.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help them to say, it's not your fault. You couldn't have helped. You couldn't have done anything.
No.
They seem to get zero relief from that in any way at all.
Yeah.
And so it does make sense because I'm sure in their minds, they have thought about all the things that they, like you said, they could have done.
Mm-hmm.
And I am wondering with this question, Dr. Zoe, if this tends to be even worse with highly responsible people that are really, they're overachievers and they make sure that they take responsibility and that they work out things and they avoid things and they make good choices, all of that. Like, so, being a highly responsible person, if you quote, quote, allowed this thing to happen to you or allow it to carry on, it just makes complete sense that you would internalize that and say, that was my fault. Even if you admitted that this, that you were victimized, you still feel like as a responsible person who knows right from wrong, I could have done something about it.
Right.
That's
100%.
powerful. That is powerful.
Yeah. And, highly responsible person, I feel like that phrase is interchangeable with internalizers because internalizers tend to be highly responsible people.
Wow. Okay. Blown away. All right. Well, Lizzie, any questions from your end?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write your book, Stronger in Difficult Places, and what are the key lessons that women can glean from in your book?
Yeah. Once I figured out that there was this different type of shame and I began to apply it to my life and work with my clients in it and saw the results, the book was just a natural byproduct of it. Interestingly, though, the book I started as a memoir. because I wanted to write this self-help book, but my story just poured out. And this book is not a memoir, but it is part memoir. My story is throughout the whole book, in addition to all of the steps to overcoming complex shame. What I want a woman to get from this book is, number one, it's time to stop hiding right now. Like, don't wait any longer. You can experience healthy love and freedom when you're willing to take that brave step to stop hiding. And in the book, I give you all the steps plus the maintenance on how to do it.
And what would stop hiding? I know you did say it shows up, at work or anywhere, and and you briefed on it a little bit, but for those that are listening, what would stop hiding look like in a very practical sense? Would that mean stop just saying the same old lines in your head as to what, why, where? Or what are some very practical ways to, or what does it look like to stop hiding in detail?
It means to speak up. It means every time you think, I better be quiet, to go ahead and say the thing and speak up. It means not being ashamed of your story, but it's more than just not being ashamed. It's speaking about it anyway, because the shame is there. It's really learning to make friends with shame and not allow the shame to silence you. And so whether it's creating boundaries in relationships, whether it's learning to say no, whether it's just learning to say, this is who I am, and I'm going to stand proud in who I am, whether it's overcoming that vulnerability hangover when you talk about the real things, all of those actions are no longer hiding. It's willing to just step up and allow the world, allow people to see who you are, and not in a martyr kind of way, in an ownership kind of way.
Which is what you did then at your
Yes,
father's passing.
I did. I did.
That's what broke that first bond for you, right? Was just standing up and telling your raw, painful, authentic story of what happened with your baby. And what drove you to do that? Did you start to come to a conclusion that if you did speak up and you were just honest, and that was a public setting, right? So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
huge. So was there an aha moment? What drove you to say, this is something I need to do? Or was it just like you couldn't hold it out any longer?
Yeah, I wish I could say that I came to this, very intentional place where I decided I'm no longer going to do this. No, it was actually my mama bear instinct that I knew my daughter was going to be there. And I had been hiding for a couple of decades, and I was no longer willing, or I wasn't willing, I should say no longer, I was not willing to put that on my daughter. My desire to take care of her and protect her forced my hand to do something that I was absolutely terrified to do. So I didn't do it from a place of strength. I did it from a place of terror, but I knew that I had to do it. And when I did, it was amazing because I didn't tell my entire story. I just told my family, I had a daughter. I placed for adoption 20 some years ago. Here she is. And when I told my children a couple days before, 2 days before my father's funeral. And then on the day of my funeral, I told my family. And, of course, they were shocked and surprised, but they welcomed her. And in that process, I just slipped out. I couldn't even breathe in that moment. I left the room. So I hope that your listeners hear that, because often we think we have to become strong before we can do hard things, and we don't. Sometimes we just have to do the hard things and the strength comes later.
That gave me the chills.
Yeah. And were you terrified that you might be rejected? I mean, that would seem to be the obvious reason that you wouldn't want to speak out, or you'd be rejected, she would be rejected, people would look at you differently. What was your biggest fear at that time?
I've been so socialized to hold the secret that this was such a big thing that in my head, I didn't have an answer for what would happen, except it seemed the world would fall apart if I spoke. And yes, I imagined, I would create shame for my family and people would reject me and they would see me differently. But the problem is it's kind of like there's that horizon out there and you don't know what's after the horizon, but you've been told it's really, really bad. And so when you get to the edge, you imagine this whole thing, but what happens is you keep sailing and there's nothing, right? There's nothing. So I didn't have a story except that it was terrible, if that makes any sense.
It does. But how empowering. and how freeing that you no longer had to hold that and hide behind it
Right.
anymore. And
Yeah.
anybody who would accept you still is great, wonderful. But if they didn't, you were going to do it anyway. I mean, that's wow. Very few people have the ability or the courage to do that because, a lot of us, I mean, we rely heavily on those people around us to give us our value,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
risking taking away, that value that we just crave because we're so broken is huge. But what a wonderful thing that you did for your daughter. That was absolutely amazing. And I love too that you didn't take the victim route. I think I would have said, which is probably a very inappropriate place to do this. I was forced to give up my baby, but
Yeah.
you're at your father's passing, and I'm sure your mom was there too, and a lot of
She
families.
was. Yeah.
You didn't even take the victim route. You just took ownership as if this was part of your decision because it made you feel that way, right?
Right. And yes, I did. And complex shame is a part of that because there was for many years this shame that I took on that I made that decision. And in the book I talk about the guilt and shame that I carry because I chose my parents over my daughter, right? Because I could have theoretically said, no, I'm not going to do this. I don't know what would have happened. I don't know where I would have lived. I didn't know any other option at that time except I need to go back home and I need to do what they told me to do. I need to do the right thing. And so that's where that complex shame gets so, it gets so complicated because yes, I made the decision. Did I have any other option? No, I didn't. And so I have learned to both recognize that I had no other option, both emotionally, sociologically, physically. And yet I've forgiven myself for the decision I made. So both of those go hand in hand. And part of that fear was fearing that I would lose my relationship with my mother and my husband, who had co signed all the things that my parents had put on me. Ultimately, I did. I don't even want to say I lost my relationship with my husband. I chose to end the relationship because I grew out of it and recognized how to be healthy. And that was years after that. That was not an immediate response. And I did not lose my relationship with my mother.
Well, that's so good to know.
Yeah, we have a
Beautiful.
great relationship.
Good.
So, do you want to talk about your relationship then? That was also a rough patch. Totally up to you. You don't have to.
My marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I told you guys I met my husband when I was 18. We got married when I was 19. We did not divorce until I was 48, I believe. So we were together almost 30 years, married 29. And it was a very codependent relationship. It was. When I got married, I did tell my husband about having placed my daughter for adoption, and he very much co-signed, like I said, or I co-signed, whoever co-signed, we both co-signed that this was a shameful thing and we would tell no one. And so I just kind of continued all of those messages, and I did not allow myself to stand strong in my marriage. I allowed my husband to control me. I allowed him to gaslight me in many ways. I was that quintessential codependent person. And I had to understand the role that I played in this by all the things that I allowed in my marriage before I was able to stand strong and get out of it. So it's not even about blaming him, although he has a lot of his own issues. It was about why I got into the marriage and what I allowed for almost 30 years before I was able to finally stand strong.
So again, not taking the victim role, taking ownership and saying that I allowed this, even though, it's not anything you would have ever chosen or wanted for your family and
Of
for your
course not.
children.
Yeah.
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 But you still take ownership. And that really resonates with me a lot because I think it's so easy just to take the complete victim role. A lot of women just keep placating and making excuses for their romantic partner to make sure that they can be okay because if the partner's okay, they're okay. And so we do drive home a lot, like and they're the worst. Like you can't keep excusing or, oh, they had a bad childhood or, oh, they're really a good guy.
Yes.
You just don't know them like I do. And you don't know what they've been
Mhm.
through. And
Mhm.
I've seen them grow, all those things. Like we do flip that script. But I think, like you said, it's so powerful to not, take the victim role once you're out. I think it's important once you're out, especially because sometimes when you're inside the relationship, you really do need to get, to put it lightly, mad.
Yes.
You need to get mad and be like, how dare you? And have that righteous indignation so that
Right.
you can boldly rise up and not take anymore. But then would you say that during the healing part is when it's most important to really analyze that complex shame by looking at where you could have done something, like in the healing part? You think when they're in the relationship, it's even as powerful?
It's just as powerful because it's not a either or. And what often happens is it's hard to demonize, for lack of a better word, your partner when you're sitting in this codependent relationship. Because if you acknowledge how bad it is, if you acknowledge all the things, then there's a part of you that says, okay, now you have to do something about it. And I remember being in that place. It's like, I don't want to leave my marriage. I don't believe in divorce. I don't want to be that single woman that I gave up my child so I wouldn't be a single woman. And here I am sitting here with now 4 children in our marriage and facing that. So many things. And so it was hard for me to even admit to what was going on in the marriage. And so I had to finally face, no, this is happening. He is doing these things and it is not okay. And I have to do something about it. So it's both. Then it becomes, I have to learn to have boundaries. I have to learn to speak up, even though it's really scary and I know it's going to create this entire backlash. I have to do these things so that I can be healthy. And it's first started, I mean, I did so much back and forth because it first started with me going, okay, if I can just get healthy myself, then that's going to fix my marriage. If I can do these things, he's going to have to change. And I did. I did all of that work, all of that self work, and I got as healthy as I can. And my marriage stayed, maybe got worse, right? Because he did not like the new person that I had become. He did not like the person that spoke up to him, that actually had an opinion, that, was wanting now to invest in myself instead of fully sacrificing everything about who I was. And so when we got to that place, he could barely tolerate me when I got to that healthy place. And eventually, we had to work out of it. So it's both. I think it's not a either or, but that anger is a great motivator.
Dr. Zoe, I really appreciate you being so transparent in your journey, in your, just your desire to help others see through this complex shame. Like I know Dina and I shared with you before, we don't really always talk about the shame complex. We do say that general, you feel a lot of guilt and shame when you're going through the
Yes.
leaving that significant other, or, in your case, it was your daughter going up for adoption, but we don't really talk about it. And just the fact that you gave us some tools to really embrace if we are really in that shame complex is really a beautiful gift, I think, to many people, because I wish I would have had that. And just the way you say it, I just embrace it. And yeah, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah.
So good. And, just a thought I had going back to hearing about you setting boundaries in the relationship. I know that I've heard this particular story from many, many women who that's when it was sort of the beginning of the end, is when they finally found a sense of self and stopped blaming themselves. And once you finally get that light bulb moment and you're able to start setting boundaries, I agree. Any narcissist is going to be furious because they have lost control. If they can't
Yes.
make you cry, if they can't make you get angry, if they can't make you apologize, lose sleep, react to their same level, get angry, yell, all the things they're doing and even beyond. If they can't get you to do that, they've lost control. And that is their biggest fear.
It is.
Are they going to reject you and disown you and or rage at you or do whatever, or are they going to really start to realize they need to become healthier? It's an amazing test of the mettle of your relationship. So
It is an amazing test. And for women out there listening, I also know it's a terrifying test because the answer feels so very scary. And for me, when we talk about shame, I had so much shame about our relationship, about what our relationship really looked like. And so I hid that. But then I also had the shame, I had the anticipatory shame of a failed marriage. And I'm this relationship expert and I have a failed marriage. What is that what are people going to say? What are they going to think about me? How is that going to affect my career? Aside from my family and my children and all of that. And so for the woman who's out there who may be thinking about that and worried about that, that shame is real. But it's funny because after I finally started talking about my marriage and my best friend, she told me one day, she said, I know that you always tried to hide. She said, but everybody saw it. You thought you were hiding, but everybody saw what your marriage was really like. And that was a big light bulb moment for me because I did think I was hiding it very well. And it turns out I wasn't even. And so I'm spending all of this energy and time trying to hide because of my shame. And it wasn't even working.
a lot of times that healthy response, you pay dearly for it
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't feel
True.
worth it at the time. But it's going to give you something inside of yourself. I don't even know what the name is. Maybe you do, Dr. Zoe, but when you stand up to that person and say, enough's enough, I can't do this anymore. This is not okay. It's not okay for you to be like this to the children. It's not okay for you to be like this to me. It does something inside of you, right? It
Yeah.
starts to degrade the shame, but also, I mean, empowering is a great word.
Yeah, it's funny because as you talked about that, I think I put it in the book. I think about that birthday candle that you can't blow out. And it's like this flame that starts. And then, yeah, maybe something happens and maybe it gets blown out for a second, but it just relights again. And so, what it starts is a flame inside you that says, no, no, no longer. I can't do this anymore. And I'm going to stand strong. And it's okay if sometimes it gets blown out because it will reignite. Mm-hmm.
For all of you listening, if you have a violent partner, if you have someone that is prone to severe emotional abuse or really any kind of abuse, make sure you always have a safe place and someone you can call. And because if you have someone who's actually a domestic violence type of abuser, doing this can really bring on abuse as
That's
well.
true.
So
Yes.
it has to be done with a lot of wisdom and a lot of support and a lot of caution with those types.
Yes.
Very true. Yes.
Yes. Well, anything else?
No, I would just tell anyone listening that it is more than okay to just start small. Because when we think of making really huge changes, it can feel so scary and overwhelming, so much so that we don't do anything. And if you can just take one tiny step towards creating a boundary, take one tiny step towards acknowledging what you're seeing is real, taking one tiny step, you're going to get there.
Love
Well
that.
said.
And I do have a quick example of that. My friend that I grew up with for our whole life, she had a very extremely financially abusive
Yep.
narcissist husband. And her first step, which by the way, she had to do this with a lot of therapy, her little baby step was he would never let her spend any money ever. Like he
Mm-hmm.
controlled every penny down to the penny.
Yes.
He refused to let her paint the cabinets or get them painted. He said, if you want them painted, you can do it yourself. I'm not spending X amount of money to have this done. And her therapist gently guided her to say, no, I want the cabinets painted. I'm going to hire somebody. And she was terrified to do that because he would withhold love from her for weeks. And she desperately needed it because she didn't have anybody outside of that relationship. She homeschooled, she was isolated, didn't have a
Classic.
job, bunch of kids. And she literally held her ground, trembling, and said, no, somebody is going to be hired to paint the cabinets and I'm going to get a quote. And he didn't even know what to say. He looked at her like she
He's
had two
flabbergasted.
heads. Yeah. He was just horrified. And he just kind of said, what, okay. All right, I guess, whatever. But of course, he ignored her and withheld love and did
Mm-hmm.
all the things. But
Mm-hmm.
she acted on it. But it
Oh,
did
I
something
love
inside of her. It lit that flame that you're talking about.
it. Did. It lit that flame. It's interesting because, yes, short of people who tend to be very physically violent, a lot of narcissists are these big bullies, and they don't know what to do when you stand up to them. All the things that you imagine are going to happen, they're loud and it's scary, but then they have no backup. They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And maybe they do, like you said, they're going to withhold love and they're going to be cold. But I'm just clapping for her that she did that hard thing, that she did it. Good for her. And yes, that starts the flame. That starts the flame.
That one little thing.
Yeah. So, Dr. Zoe, tell us again the name of your book, if you would, and where we can find it. I know we're going to put links and everything,
Yeah.
on your description, but tell us
I
one more
have it
time.
here. It's called
Perfect.
Stronger in the Difficult Places. The subtitle is Heal Your Relationship with Yourself by Untangling Complex Shame. And you can find it anywhere that books are found or sold. And I'm happy to provide a free chapter for your listeners. I can give you the link and they can get a free chapter and read it and see if this book feels like it's for them.
I love that. Yes. No, please send it to us and we'll put it in the YouTube and also all of our other platforms.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe, for being here. It was such a delight, and I just enjoyed spending time with you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the work that you are doing with other women. I know that you are saving lives, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
If you are ready to break free from shame and unlock emotional freedom, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this episode with somebody navigating healing, trauma recovery, relationship challenges. Let us know in the comments, what did you learn today about your own relationship with complex shame?